So, I have the axle back in through the axle hub. As you place that in, you have to put the axle spacer on. Sorry, you can't really see that down there. Then you put on the axle sprocket here. This way it's lined up. Wide edge on the back, narrow to the outside. Then there's a flat washer here that goes on before you put on the sprocket holding nut. When you get to this point, you have to use a little bit of force to get this in. It's going to start sealing before you can get the nut started. Once the nut started, I'm going to invert the way I took it out with the slide hammer. That was the easiest way for me to get the axle out. I just kind of worked it around the edge, rotated a little, slowly pulled it out. As you pull it out, you've got to loosen that sprocket holding nut. So you have to kind of loosen the nut. It's a 2-inch nut, by the way. You have to loosen that as you slowly bring this out. When you get to a point, I would say about this far out. So when you have only this much gap, not this whole gap, but only about this much, that's about where the nut came off completely, and then I was able to remove the axle, separate it from the sprocket, bring the axle out. Now you also have to take off all of these gears in order to get the axle sprocket out. It doesn't fit with this whole clutch assembly and this gear on. So I had to take this gear off and this clutch assembly off to get the sprocket out. Now reversing, we've done all that. I'm putting the sprocket back in. So I started set the sprocket in place, started the hub or the axle, put the spacer on, put the sprocket on, got the washer in place, and now I have the nut started. So I'm going to start slowly tapping this in and tightening the nut. If I remember right, there was only about that much gap when we were finished. We're going to compare it to the others as we go, but I would say 1/8 inch gap is how much I need to close this. But you have to go slow and crank the nut as you install the axle. So catch up in a minute.